welcome to this evening's event. I want to begin by recognizing and thanking several people without whom this evening's event would not have been possible. Some of them are in the back and they're going to come out. Cool. Ashley Cosgrove, the coordinator of the University Honors Program. Ashley has spent many anxious hours working on all the endless tasks associated with this event. She was assisted in these tasks by Kylie Miller, Tina Wong. Where's old Tina? And Brinley Xavier. Ha! To all of you, our deepest thanks. Last but not least, the University Honors Program would like to thank President Struper. When the Honors Program invited Angela Davis to our campus a year and a half ago, Daniele suggested that we should invite John Carlos. Since then, he has provided all the moral and, I wish to underline, financial support necessary to make this visit a reality. Thank you, Daniele. We all know of human rights activists who, although powerless to immediately halt some injustice or another, never fail to exercise their power to protest against injustice. Sometimes their protest took the form of powerful symbolic actions aimed at appealing to our fundamental human decency, with the hope that their actions would so disturb our consciences that we would be spurred to at least face contemporary horrors which hurt and silence so many because of their economic status or religion or race or gender or sexual orientation or place of birth. Many of us remember one of the most pivotal of such civil rights activists, Mahatma Gandhi, and his long symbolic march in 1830. Thousands followed him for nearly 240 miles to the Arabian Sea, where he simply bent down at the shoreline and picked up some salt. That symbolic act violated Britain's Salt Act of 1882, which prohibited Indians from collecting or selling salt, a staple of their diet. During that march, nearly 60,000 people were arrested, including Gandhi. We're also familiar with artists who have used their skills to trouble our consciences. One of my favorites is Bertolt Brecht. He used his immense talent to do just that. He once wrote, "What kind of times are these when to talk about trees is almost a crime because it implies silence about so many horrors?" What we were not in the habit of expecting is that athletes would engage in Gandhi's kind of symbolic action. Yet many of them have used the considerable platforms which they have earned through incredible hard work and relentless discipline to do just that. Instead of using these platforms for narcissistic self-promotion, they have risked everything to use them in the service of noble causes greater than themselves, and many of them have done so at significant personal cost. One of these athletes, on his return from the 1980 Summer Olympics in Rome, threw his Olympic gold medal, which he wore all the time, into the Ohio River after he and a friend were denied service at a whites-only restaurant. He refused any longer to wear a medal for a country which routinely disregarded his humanity through socially sanctioned everyday humiliations such as refusing to serve him food. The remarkable Muhammad Ali. And we all know the price he paid for his activism. Two black athletes at the 1968 Summer Olympics in Mexico City raised gloved fists in the Black Power salute while on the medal podium as their country's anthem played. And they did so to call the world's attention to the long history of racial injustice which desecrated again and again the human dignity and the human rights of Black people in their country, the United States. John Carlos and Tommy Smith were joined in their symbolic action by the white Australian runner, Peter Norman. Peter didn't raise the gloved fist, although it is reported that he wanted to. But like both John and Tommy, he wore a badge over his left breast which read, Olympic Project for Human Rights. On that podium, these three athletes sacrificed personal glory on the altar of justice, and each paid a heavy price for that sacrifice. Half a century after John and Peter and Tommy, other athletes have engaged in action to call attention to contemporary horrors. Colin Kaepernick took a knee during the national anthem to bring attention to police brutality and racial profiling, especially the extrajudicial execution of Black men by the police in one city after another across the United States. And he has paid a price by not being employed any longer as an athlete. And then came along another person who was the first prominent white athlete to follow Colin in taking a knee during the playing of the national anthem. Her symbolic act angered many people, and there was economic fallout as enrollment in her summer camp and sales of her clothing brand faltered. These days, she simply stands in silence during the national anthem to protest the cruel policies by the current administration against some of the most vulnerable in our society, as well as to protest the naked employment of fear and hatred and resentment as political tools. The indomitable Megan Rapinoe, who is reported to have received death threats. Whether they throw away their medals, raise their gloved fists, take a knee, or stand in silence, these athletes all pay a heavy price to call us from all forms of complacency with or accommodation of that which is simply wrong, by reminding us that our lives are worth living only if they serve some noble cause greater than ourselves. In effect, to paraphrase Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., these athletes remind us over and over again, not only that the desecration of human dignity and human rights anywhere is the desecration of human dignity and human rights everywhere, but more importantly, they remind us that when faced with such desecration, we each have the moral obligation to do that which is honorable by doing that which is right, whatever the cost. It is indeed a rare occasion in life to meet one of your heroes, and certainly one of the rarest to be given the honor of introducing a video about them. Tonight is one of those rarest of occasions for me, because tonight I have the honor of introducing a video on John Carlos. Chapman's president, Daniele Strupper, was just a young 13-year-old, and I was 18 years old when John raised his gloved fist at the Summer Olympics in Mexico City in 1968. And from that moment on, for both Daniele and me, John, you became a lifelong inspiration. Someone who, when words and actions were not cheap, took an honorable stand, which has echoed down through the years, calling all people of goodwill to always strive to do what is right and just and noble, no matter the cost. Please join me in watching this video.
Mexico City, 1968. The opening day ceremonies of the 19th Olympiad of the modern Olympic era. Once again, United States male athletes are expected to dominate the track and field events. Before the games began, American black athletes had threatened a boycott of the Olympics, but finally decided to compete. Before the games would be over, however, there would be a major protest by black athletes that would receive worldwide attention.
If someone is concerned about your education, you should show a little concern yourself. All right?
This is John Carlos of the United States. Today he is coaching young boys and girls for future competitions. More than a decade ago, John Carlos was one of a group of black American athletes who had threatened to boycott the Olympic Games and subsequently was involved in the protest that overshadowed the actual event he competed in.
Well, I wanted to do something for the human race. I would say that, people are being oppressed. All sorts of minorities are being oppressed. But, I would say that black people were being oppressed in particular. And by me being a black individual, I guess people would say, well, he's catering more to the black cause.
October 16th, 1968. The final of the 200 meters. The favorites, Tommie Smith and John Carlos of the United States. John Carlos is second from the right. John Carlos leads going into the final turn. But Tommie Smith alongside him is coming on fastest of all. Tommie Smith first. Peter Norman, Australia, second. John Carlos, third. The victory platform ceremony takes place. Tommie Smith, Peter Norman, and John Carlos receive their medals. The United States national anthem is played. Smith and Carlos raise their arms in the Black Power salute. It is noticed that Peter Norman is wearing a human rights button given to him by John Carlos before the platform ceremony began.
I asked Peter Norman, I said, hey, are you for human rights? And Peter Norman said, yes, I am. I said, well, would you mind wearing an Olympic Project for Human Rights button? So he said, no, and he put it on.
More than a decade later, Peter Norman of Australia is remembered more for the platform ceremony than for winning the silver medal.
I did wear a button on my tracksuit that said Olympic Project for Human Rights, and human rights is something that I've believed in for a long time and still do believe in. Luckily, as we turned to face the flags, John and Tommie were behind me, so I didn't see any of the incident. A lot of people assumed that I'd actually taken part in the saluting, which I hadn't done. and there was a bad taste about that side of it. If I couldn't get across to them that civil rights and human rights is something that's worth believing in, if I couldn't get that message across to them, well, I suppose they thought I was a pretty bad sort of a character. But by the same token, when people heard that my actions were prompted because of my belief in human rights, there was a more favourable sort of an attitude to it.
I'm proud to be an American, but yet and still even far greater than that, I'm proud to be a human being. I would be even prouder if I can be treated as such. John Carlos received, let's say, the bulk of the oppression that took place after Mexico. I feel at the same time with the agony that I felt after the games that above everything else, I received an enormous amount of knowledge and education in terms of how to solve various problems that I had, and even greater than that, how to convey it to other individuals. Go! Come on, up, 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 up! Good, Mac. Up, 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 up!
Good evening, everybody. It's strange. I give speeches all the time. I gave a couple today. I give talks everywhere. And last week I was on the stage with a former president of the United States. But I'm really never nervous. I've been speaking so often. But I'm nervous tonight. So, as Carmichael said, I took advantage of my role as a president to decide the person that we will invite for this colloquium here in Chapman University. That's one of the many privileges I have, and one that I rarely take advantage of, but in this case I did. And for the last 2 years, I've been pestering Carmichael, asking him, so do we have John Carlos? Is he going to come? When is he going to come? Last year, just to reinforce this, I was in Washington, D.C., and I visited the Museum of African American History, and there is a beautiful bronze statue of exactly the picture you saw before of John Carlos, Tommy Smith, and their Australian friend receiving the medals and the famous feast. And on top of that statue, there is a sentence from John Carlos that says, how can you ask someone to live in the world, to exist in the world, and not have something to say about injustice? And so I want to thank Carmichael and John Carlos for making this happen, for being able to give me this wonderful gift to have them here today. I've always been a big fanatic of track and field. I remember the first Olympics I saw. I was 5 years old. It was in Rome in 1960. I was probably a kind of a symbolic gesture that the international community was welcoming back Italy among civilized nations after the disaster of World War II. And I remember 4 athletes of that Olympics. I was little, but with my dad, we were watching this all the time. And I remember Abebe Bikila, phenomenal Ethiopian runner who ran the marathon and got the gold medal in the marathon running barefoot for 42 plus kilometers. I remember Wilma Rudolph. She was kind of a hero in Italy. She was a young African-American woman who won 3 gold medals, 100, 200, and 4 times 100 meters. And she actually had an interesting story because she had polio as a child, and she struggled and became obviously a world-class runner. And in Italy, the newspaper used to call it La Gazzella Nera, which means the black gazelle. I remember the boxer that Carmichael mentioned before. His name was Cassius Clay at the time, and obviously then he became known as Muhammad Ali, and he won the gold medal. And then I remember an Italian runner, Livio Berruti, who was the first Italian to ever win the gold medal in a short race. He won the gold medal for a 200 meters dash. And so he was kind of an Italian hero at the time. And so my dad and I always used to do this, and all of our passion were really in the track and field. And I think the reason why I like track and field so much is the same reason why I like math and chess, is because there is no BS there. It is what it is. In math, a theorem is true or is not true. In chess, you win or you lose, and there is nothing, you can't look for excuses. It's the same is true with track and field. You know, you're fast or you're not. That's a very simple thing, and I think that appeals to my spirit. The great Lasker was a world champion of chess. He used to say on the chessboard, lies die, because there is no way you can cover up. And so I remember very well these events. As Carmichael has said, in 1968 I was 13, and I will never forget that night. And since then, Mr. Carlos has been one of my heroes. And I think it's so important today. His example is an example of courage when there is a price to pay for that courage. And that's what we need now. We live in a society that is becoming fearful, opportunistic, and we need to hope that humans can be better than that. And I think that that's what John Carlos does for us. It's not just his courage, but with his gesture, he reminds us of what is the best that we have in ourselves, what we can do if we just allow ourselves to be strong. And so tonight I want to take advantage of a second privilege that I have as a president. And I'd like to ask Carmichael to come out with me, and Mr. Carlos to please join me at the podium. And then I'll be done, and I'll let you guys enjoy Mr. Carlos and Carmichael talk to each other. Carmichael, will you join me from behind the curtain? Thank you. So, as president of the university, I get to give the presidential medal. And I'm the only one who decides who gets it, so it's a kind of a committee of one. And in my tenure as president, I've only done this 3 times. The first time was for Romeo Dallaire. You remember the General Dallaire was one of the heroes in the tragedy in Rwanda. The second was to Caroline Forché, an award-winning poet that documented the tragic war in El Salvador. And the third was for Dolores Huerta, a year ago in this same stage, for her life dedicated to the support of migrant workers. And so tonight I'd like to award this medal to Mr. Carlos. This is not an Olympic medal. And this is not the gold medal you got at the Pan American Games in 1967. It doesn't celebrate one of his great feats, 1992, on the 200-meter dash. When he did it in 1968, he was the fastest man ever to run that race, an amazing result. And then his world record of the 100 yards. So this is not one of those medals, but I hope you'll accept it as a sign of our affection and gratitude. And now I leave you to John Carlos and Carmichael.
We're good. We're good. Hey, can you turn the lights up? And turn these down, maybe turn the house lights up? You got like to see people that I'm talking to. Thank you. Let me start by saying, first of all, it's an honor for me to be here at Chapman University. It's a special honor for me because my grandson graduated from here last year. So, and I'd like to give thanks to the president for just having me in his heart and his mind for all these years and being consistent and trying to have me come here. Before I get started, I'd like to say, I don't really like applause, okay? And my wife get on me all the time because I say this, but I say it because I'm not here to give a soft shoe dance or sing a song. I'm here to try and deliver a message to someone in the audience. Could be that fella back there, could be that lady there, could be this young fella out front here. So I'm not here for applause, but what we did, we hired security, and we told security, if anyone applauds, we're gonna have you come and usher them out, so be on your P's and Q's. Now, before I get started again, let me introduce one of my Olympic brothers and then one of my brothers that I went to college with that pushed me to the Olympics. And it just so happened these two individuals are brothers. The first one is a two-time Olympian, 1964. Sorry, Ed, I tried to make you a little older than you were. And 1968, the great Ed Crothers, the high jumper. Now, Ed was all right, but his brother was like my teammate in college. He was my buddy. He ran for the same club that I ran for, and we just been lifelong friends. It's a blessing to have two guys that you love so much and then find that they're brothers as well. Stand up, Sam Crothers. Would you stand up and take a bow as well? Sam could have been the first black pole vaulter to ever go 18 feet. We had a guy named Chris Papanikolaou that was going to college from Greece, and he was a pretty good pole vaulter. But when Sam got on, he got nervous all the time because I was telling Sam, forget running the decathlon and focus on the pole vault. But he was happy that Sam decided to do other things. All right, let me tell you a little bit about who I am and how I came about. I'm born June 5th, 1945 in Harlem, New York. Most people think that's when my life started at that time, but my life actually started in my mom's womb. Why? Because God was preparing me. Whoever God is, I don't know who he is, but I know he is because he communicates with me on a regular basis. And my mother would have to go to the doctor to have me turned around in her womb because I was a moving baby. And the doctor told my mother, so we're going to have to move this baby because it looks like he might break his limbs. So they did this procedure. By the time my mother could get on the train to go back home, I'm on the move again. So it happened 2 times where the doctor went in and moved me around, but the 3rd time the doctor told my mother, said, Mrs. Collins, it looks like this baby has a mind of its own. We just better leave it alone and let it be. When I came into the world feet first. So whoever the creator is, he was trying to let the world know that these big feet here are going to be doing some walking. As I grew up in Harlem, New York, I grew up between the 2 most famous nightclubs in the world, the Savoy Ballroom and the Cotton Club. So what kept me balanced and kept me mellow and kept me on the ground and at the same time still had that fire was the great bands that came in, the Count Basie and Duke Ellington and Lena Horne and all those individuals. We would open the window at night just to listen to the music. But then I noticed something while I was listening to the music when I would go outside, a lot of my friends didn't have the flavor that I had. I knew something was off, something was wrong, because things that I looked at, they looked the other way. And then I began to go and look in their houses. I began to see that they didn't have in their houses what I had in mind. Fortunately for me, I had a mom and a dad. My father was an entrepreneur. He was a shoemaker, a cobbler. My mother came in from Cuba. She used to clean the abortion offices. I used to go in the office with her. But then I told my mother, I said, Mom, if you can clean up what the doctor does, you can go to school and you can be a doctor. I must have been 7, 8 years old when I told my mother that. Well, she went to school. She became a nurse. She worked at Bellevue Hospital for many years. But I remember at the same time, when I looked at my friends and what was going on in their houses, I saw we had ice box. We didn't have a fridge like you have modern day. We had an ice box. And when I looked in their ice box, they didn't have ice, much more food. Then I began to look in their cabinets. They didn't have no food in their cabinets. They didn't even have the little plastic cups and plates. Then I didn't notice that my partners was wearing the same clothes every day. And the clothes that they were wearing, they were handed down by their older brother. I was living a little better than that. But why is my family living better and theirs living so poorly? Then I began to remember that they had a thing called King Kong in the neighborhood. And for you young guys out there that might know about drugs, they had something called PCP years ago. And it's a hallucinative drug. Well, this King Kong was a bootleg liquor, and it was like PCP. They would drink this liquor and go up to the roof and dive off to their death. Every weekend, be 2 or 3 of them die. I had a concern about that as a little boy, but I'm a little boy and I can't change anything but take notice. Then one night I went to sleep and I woke up and King Kong was gone. But what came into place of King Kong was 10 times worse than King Kong, was something called heron or mud or smack or dirt. And I tried to equate in my mind what happened. And as my teenage years went about, or my young adulthood, is a movie that came out called Lady Sings the Blues. And it dawned on me that there's a parallel between that heron coming in and taking the place of this, King Kong and this movie. Because I remember Diana Ross was in the movie and she was on the bus and she saw the scene where the Klan came and they was burning the cross, and she was so distraught she couldn't go to work that night to perform. And somebody came to her and said, listen, Diana, or Billy, take this package here. They gave her a little package. Take this package here. It'll help you get through the night. Well, I equated that package that they gave her to so many kids that grew up in my neighborhood to their fathers. They took those drugs. They thought it was a weekend trip. They didn't realize it was 60, 70, 80 years that they would still be sprung on these drugs. So I was compelled to go up on the roof. I said, let me find some of these junkies. These guys are shooting this stuff, and find out, why are you shooting it? Why are you shooting it? Every day I'm asking, I need to know. And then one of them said to me, he said, Johnny, do you really want to know? I said, that's why I keep coming back. So, well, let me tell you. I said, did you ever have a little girlfriend that you liked? I said, yeah, I got cut a few girls. He said, well, I had one. He said, it took me 5 years to get enough courage to go and approach this young girl to even let her know that I liked her. He said, but I stepped up, I got the courage, and I approached her. She said, sure, I had my eye on you too. They got together. He said they was together for 5 more years, he said, before he got the courage to ask her to marry him. He said, and she told him yes. He said his heart was about to explode with joy and happiness because the girl of his life told him that she would love for him to be her man, her husband. I said, well, what happened, man? How could you go from there to the drugs? He said, every morning, man, prior to that time, I would get up and I would go in the mirror. I would wash my face and brush my teeth and do my hair and the whole 9 yards every day of my life. He said, but for the first time in my life, I looked in the mirror and saw myself. And I didn't like me. As a young kid, I'm looking at, what do you mean you didn't like yourself? He said, well, I didn't like what I saw in the mirror. I said, why did you like what you saw? He said, because all the dreams and all that ambition that I had to be the best father, the best husband, the best breadwinner. He said, all of that was taken away from me. He said, I couldn't be the best husband to my wife. I couldn't be the best breadwinner for my wife. I couldn't be anything for my kids. Because someone was putting their foot on my neck to keep me down, to hold me back. I was too young to understand that. I said to him, to hold you back. He said, yeah. He said, when you tell your wife that you want to go to work and do everything you can to bring home the butter, to make sure that your kids had what they needed for school, to make sure that they had food in the cabinets, to make sure that I can feel good about being a man, getting up, going to work, and bringing it home. He said, I never had that opportunity. Don't mind you now, other individuals had it around all throughout the edges of my community. He said, but those in my community didn't have it. I took note. I saw the kids that didn't have any house. Now I'm here. The junkies tell me about why they were shooting drugs, because they was trying to escape from who they were. My role is, what can I do? God came to me when I was 7 years old and gave me a vision, premonition, or whatever it was, but I know I saw myself on the wall as a little kid in a forum. I didn't know what a forum was or a stadium was. I know I was standing on a box. I couldn't see the people, but I could hear them, and they all applauding, yippee-ki-yay, and excited about something. And it took a minute for me to realize it must be John Carlos that they're applauding about, because no one else was out in that field but me. And I'm right-handed. I laid a lot of guys down with this right hand. But in this vision, I went to wave with my left hand. And as you're a little kid, you go to wave, and you want to put your hand as high as you can. You want to ease up on your toes because you want everyone to see you. And just as I went to raise my hand up, where you sweeten that vision in that poster, that's exactly where that hand froze in that vision. Why did it freeze? Because all of the joy and happiness that they was expelling upon in the beginning immediately turned to anger and venom, cussing, spitting, telling me where to go. 15 years later, I would think it would be to the day I was in Mexico City in the same scenario. And all the boos came after the cheers. It made me reflect back to when I was a kid, how I got to that point. As I went up and got involved trying to help those individuals that didn't have food in the cabinets or clothes in the closets, I turned on my TV one day, a little fishbowl TV. And I remember seeing this guy had a funny looking outfit, funny looking hat, looked like he was wearing his mother's stockings. But I liked his character. The guy's name was Robin Hood. And I think that any person that's depressed or down on their luck, they could admire Robin Hood. And why did I admire him? Because Robin Hood was a man that wasn't concerned about the sheriff of Nottingham. He wasn't concerned about the king. He was concerned about those that was less fortunate. He said, you pillaging the people, but you got to come through Nottingham Forest. I control Nottingham Forest. Well, my Nottingham Forest was the freight trains right out in front of the Yankee Stadium. You come here through my neighborhood, you got to pay a tariff. That tariff for me was to hit them freight trains and break it in. And mind you, now I wasn't raised to be no thief. I wasn't raised to be no thug. But I was raised to do what was right. I thought it was right, only right, to get into those freight trains and feed people that couldn't feed themselves, or clothe people that couldn't clothe themselves. I remember my father used to tell me, he said, son, if I find out you doing anything out of line, you're going to have to deal with me. And I remember I used to take people clothes and food and the whole 9 yards, and they wanted to give me money. I tell them, no, I'll keep your money, but if you want to pay me, don't tell my father, because he didn't play. But I went from that point on now, I'm starting to realize that the popo done got in touch with me. They realized that I was hitting these trains, so they would run, and I always had 2 partners. Never had 3, always 2 of my main partners. And we run, they told me, well, man, we hit them trains, we're going to have fat pockets. No, I mean, this is not for our pockets. This is for those that don't have. I said, and you don't even have. I say, so what we're going to do, we're going to bring this back and we're going to give it to the people in the neighborhood that need it. And I remember coming across 155th Street Bridge. There was a little house there that the guy sits in all day, and his job is to open the bridge when they call him. Well, I thought about when we run across those bridges, those crates every day, the police are going to be after us, and they're going to call him on the phone and say, open this bridge up at such and such a time. I'm thinking ahead. So I said, sir, I said, how much they pay you to do this job that you have? He said, they don't pay me enough to sit here all day, and I don't have anything but a telephone and a newspaper. I said, well, you see us running across here all the time. If we come by and the man asks you to open that bridge up, I said, if you'll give us 5 minutes after he tell you to open the bridge, I'll leave you something every time we go by. He said, oh, no, son, I can't do that. And I turned away to walk away, dejected like, he said, oh, but I can give you 3 minutes. When he said that, I looked at him and smiled, so we got a deal. But as I stated, the police was in conjunction with God. Because as I'm coming across the bridge, they chasing us. I got a box on my shoulder and a box on my arm, or they could never catch me. They always caught my partners. But they saw me. Yeah, you know, police is smart back then. They didn't chase you. They chased you with their eyes. And they went to my father and said, Earl, there's been some breakers in the freight yards. And you need to talk to Johnny. And my father stopped me. He said, no, that's your job. And they came and caught me right where they built the new Yankee Stadium today. It used to be a track. And I was over there with my partners because we going over there to try and take our old shoes and switch and get some new Converse sneakers from the guys who was running the little track meet. They circled the whole park, blocked it off with all the police cars, and they came in and said, Johnny, come over here. And Mr. Lester was about 5'11". Mr. Brown was like 6'6". Mr. Brown said to Mr. Lester, he said, go on, tell him. I looked at Mr. Lester and he said, you have a talent. I said, what's that? He said, you're a runner. And I kind of like, yeah, smirked. Mr. Bryan smacked me upside my head. Don't you ever disrespect Mr. Lester. I said, I'm not disrespecting Mr. Lester. He said, I'm a runner. Everybody in the neighborhood runs. He said, no, you're special. Take this number and go down to the New York Pioneer Club. Now, you know, God give everybody a gift. Everybody sitting in here and everybody outside this door in the world has a basket that God gives you special gifts. Now, a lot of people miss it. They go through life, never find that basket to look in there and see what gifts God gave them. I was a good boxer. I was going to go to Golden Clubs. I was going to be a professional boxer. My mom stopped me. I was a better swimmer. I wanted to go, when I first heard about the Olympic Games, even prior to the games, I wanted to swim the English Channel. Why? Because I was the best Harlem bathtub swimmer there was, bar none. I want to go. But I couldn't go swimming because of the color of my skin, which I kept notes in my mind on that. My mother wouldn't allow me to box because I was too young. And then I went to a church because I have voids in my mind, and I'm trying to fill these voids with answers, and the adults that I went to, they couldn't help me. So I said, it must be a higher power. Let me go find this higher power. So I found this church called Abyssinia Baptist Church. I went into church, first time by myself, like what I saw, I like the fact that you get in and get out. I went home, I told my mom and dad, I said, listen, I found this church. We don't never go to church, let's go to church. So my mother didn't never go, but my father and my brothers and I, we got up and we went. By the time we were there the third time, Adam Clayton Powell Sr. came out that particular day, and he wasn't feeling well, and he said, I'm not going to preach a sermon today. I'm going to let my son preach the sermon. I said, oh, okay. Well, Daddy, who's his son? And he said, there he is over there, and he pointed over there, and when I turned my head and looked, there was 3 people there. I turned back, Daddy, which one is his son? He said, the one they helped him put the robe on. Oh, no, Daddy, that's not his son. What do you mean that's not his son? That's his son. No, Daddy, that's not his son. That is his son. Why do you think it's not his son? I said, because that's a white man they putting that robe on. He said to me, he said, no, he's not white. I said, no, Daddy, clean your glasses. He's a white man. And he said, no, he's not white, and he's not passing. Now, I never heard the word passing other than pass the football or pass the salt and pepper. I know, no, passing what, Daddy? What do you mean he's passing? And my father looked at me and he said to me, he said, he's not passing to be white. And I said to him, I said, Daddy, are you telling me that black people are ashamed of being black, that they want to be somebody else? He said, no, son, I don't have time right now to explain it to you, but tomorrow morning, I'll explain to you what I'm saying. Sure enough, that Monday we get up, go out in front of the shop. Now, like I said, I lived on Lenox Avenue, had an island running down the middle of Lenox Avenue. Come out, and he said, now, go on this trip with me, son. He said, on our side of the street, it's misting, it's damp, it's cold. No double dutch with the girls, no loadies, no stickball, no fruit stand. He said, but on the other side of the street, the sun is shining, the girls is out there playing double dutch, the boys playing stickball, little kids playing loadies, and they got the fruit stand and the ice cream stand. I started walking. He said, where you going? Put his hand on my shoulder. I said, I'm going over there. He said, what's the matter? You don't like your neighborhood? I said, no, Daddy, I love home. He said, well, why are you going over there? I said, because they got ice cream, they got the girls, they got stickball. He said, well, that's what I was telling you about the guy that said he might try and pass to be white. Not that he don't like being black. He figured if he can slide in the white world, he can have a better life. So when you think about my father telling me that maybe 60 years ago, or a little longer, and think of how relevant it is today. People don't leave Haiti and say, I want to go and be a burden on America. America's boasted about its greatness as long as my 74 years, by how great we are. And they think that other people don't want to come share the greatness. They're not coming here because they don't like Mexico, or they don't like Puerto Rico, or they don't like Africa, or they don't like Asia. They're coming here for better opportunities, the same opportunities that you had before you. Then when you go back to God, when God threw this bubble together, He's almighty. He could have come down and someone put up borders, but he didn't put no borders up. Egotistical, self-serving individuals put borders up. That same individual that tell me that I didn't have the right as a black man to attend this university. As a black man, I don't have the right to apply for this job. As a black man, I don't have a right to walk down this neighborhood. Same individuals that want to perpetrate and dictate and tell society. Here we are in 2019, and society still haven't woken up and realized the power that they have within themselves. Understand, we don't have to have the government take care of our problems. If we as people get our lives together and say, you know, I don't have fear for what's doing right. A guy told me, he said, man, you know, you can get killed doing so-and-so. I said, man, well, let me take it a little farther and tell you, I was born dead as a black man. I'm fighting for life. All of us are fighting for life. If I'm doing bad, society's doing bad. Because you can't rest if I'm uncomfortable. I sit back and I look at little kids that go through school because of the drug epidemic that took place 70 years ago. That's still vital in this community right now. To the point where they so into the drugs that's out there in the streets until they're not even concerned about what's happening with their kids in school. And I have to tell them as an educator, they say, man, hold on, slow your roll. Let me ask you a question. It's a simple question, but you need to ask yourself this question. So what's that, Mr. Carlos? The question is, are you going to school or are you going through school? And a lot of our kids have a tendency to go through school. It's almost like the guys that have the brains, they look at them and want to call them clowns because they're going to school. Something is broke. It's guys like me, it's guys like Gandhi, it's guys like King, it's guys like Malcolm, it's guys like Nat Turner, it's guys like John Brown, guys like Peter Norman. These are the ones that say we're the fixers. We are willing to sacrifice and suffer to try and make it a better world by giving you a paradigm. If you don't see anything, you don't want anything. That's why God came to me at 7 years old and told me, say, here, Johnny, you can do this. You don't have to do it, but you can take part. And as I looked at it as a kid, I looked for adults to do things. I looked for clergy to do it. I looked for the business people to do it. I ain't seen none of them step up. And how did I get courage to do things? I guess it was through my mother one day. We in the pit in my project playing stickball every Saturday. And my mother coming home from work, she worked nights at Bellevue, she would come home and all the other mothers would be sitting on the bench. She'd come in, she'd give me a nod in the pit. She'd go over to the women, she'd nod at them, but she'd keep it moving. She'd never stop, sat down with them. Well, this particular Saturday, I had enough of that. And I went to my mother and I said, Mom, I said, let me ask you a question. She said, what's that? I said, are you stuck up? And my mother looked at me, she said, what did you say? And like a dummy, I said to her again, are you stuck up? And when I looked back at my mom for the first time in my life, I ever saw tears in my mother's eyes. And she says to me, she said, Johnny, why would you ask me something like that? I've never carried myself to think I was better than anyone. I never raised my kids to think I was better than anyone. Why would you come and say this to me? I said, well, Mom, you see the other women down there. You never take no time to sit down with them, to mingle, to talk, to be like one of the moms in the project. And my mother said something to me. She said, Johnny, I work in the operating room at the hospital. I cannot go in the operating room and have a sores or rash on my body. I'm trying to figure out where you coming from with that, Mama. And she said, the caterpillars. And I remember when we used to go up to High Bridge Pool in the white area, they spraying them trees. The same way they sprayed the trees when I was a little boy in a little wading pool in my project. But as I began to grow into 13, 14 years old, somewhere along the way, they stopped spraying my trees. So at night, the caterpillars were so monstrous, you could hear in the silence them eating the leaves. And if anyone knows about a caterpillar, if it falls out the tree and it hits you in the neck, by the time you try and get off your neck, it's so fragile it's going to bust. Before you can put your hand to your leg, you got a rash on your neck. So I said, yo, good point my mother made. So I took it upon myself to go to management in the project. Yes, sir. What can I do for you? Well, sir, we have a problem. I'm 13 years old. What do you mean we have a problem? What problem? The caterpillars. Well, right away he says to me, get out of my office. I didn't know at that time about a panic button, where he pushed something under his desk, and about 10 minutes later, the police and the prison guard, not the prison guard, but the project guard, come. He said, get him out of my office. So they rushed me out. They knew me. Come on, Johnny, come on out. I broke away from him. I went back. I said, man, you got 48 hours. They said, you threatening him? No, it's a money-back guarantee. If he don't take care of the problem, I will. Now, I went back there and I set some trees on fire, 4 trees. And mind you, the trees are well today. But I went there and I said to him, I waited 48 hours, nothing happened. I told the ladies on the bench, I said, y'all go down the other end of the project or y'all can go upstairs. I'm going to take some of this off. Y'all go upstairs. Forgive me. And I said, y'all don't want to be around here. It's going to be a little hot around here in a minute. And I remember we used to have stick matches at that time to light the stove with. I had a pocket full of stick matches in the back pocket. And I went down to my father's friend at a gas station and said, Mr. Gardner, Pop sent me down here to get some gas. He said, well, where's the gas can? I said, he didn't send one. He said, well, go back there and get one. Well, I went and got the biggest can I could find. Fill it up. I went back, hit the first tree, hit the match on my zipper, threw it in the tree, and I had a little mustache coming in. It singed my mustache, singed my nose. You know when you can smell hair when it's burning. But I didn't let that stop me. I hit the second tree before I can get the match. The fire jumped over to the second tree. Now we had a little walkway, 2 walkways, so before you hit the other 2 trees. So I crossed the walkway, and by the time I hit the 3rd tree, the police and the guard was there. And they called, Johnny, don't do it. Well, I did it. Because they didn't know whether they should try and put the fires out or whether they should try and stop me. Well, they waited too long because I wasn't waiting. Well, finally they dove on me. I had to go to court. I lost my mother last year, and I never told my mother until a week before she died about what that situation was at the courthouse. And the reason why I told my mother is because the day we were supposed to be going to court, I hear my mother upstairs telling my father, say, Earl, I'm not going down to that courthouse and let that boy make me look like a damn fool. Why would he do what he did? My father said, I don't know, Vi, but we need to go to the court. She said, well, I'm not going. You take him down there. And I remember my father taking me and he told me, he said, son, he said, when you come home, if you come home, you need to explain to your mom. I said, look, Dad, what do you mean if I come home? Son, you might not come home. You might go to reform school. You might go to juvenile hall. What you did was a bad thing. I said, no, Pop, I made sure everybody was safeguarded. So we get into court. The judge finally called us up there. And the first thing the judge asked my father, Mr. Carlos, does your son have any mental deficiencies? I'm looking at him, what are you talking about mental? So my father looks at me and says, no, Your Honor, he doesn't have any mental problems that I know of. And the judge said, well, why would he do what he did? My father said, well, sir, he's here. We'd like to know too. So the judge looked at me and he said, young man, he said, why did you do what you did? Now I explained to him what I did and why I did it. So he called the manager of the project up. Come up here. He swears him in. He said to him, he said, well, how often do you get money to spray? He said, well, we get a stipend every year. He said, well, how often do you spray? He said, we spray every year. He said, do you have records? He said, yes, sir. Get your records. It's a good time to go to lunch. We're taking lunch. When you come back, bring your records back. We come back from lunch, and when we went to lunch, incidentally, my father telling me again, son, I don't know, things don't look good. You might not be coming home with me. So we get back in the court, and the judge calls the manager of the project up again. And he says to him, he said, well, did you bring your records with you? And he said, yes, sir. And he gives him another folder, 1 piece of paper in it. And the guy looks at the judge and he says, well, Your Honor, my secretary is out ill, and I don't know where she keeps the files. But then it made me realize that a judge is a smart person. Because when we went to lunch, he didn't wait for the guy to bring papers back. He called the New York Housing Authority and told them to send somebody down with all the records. Oh, you don't have the records? Go have a seat. Someone here from the New York City Housing Authority, fella gets up, and he's got one of those big, almost look like an accordion type folder. You tie the brown string on it, and he comes up and he swears them in. He said, well, let me ask you a question, sir. He says, how often do you give out a stipend? He said, well, sir, we give a stipend to every project every year. So the stipend to do what? To cure rats, roaches, ants, any type of pesticide. That's what we have it for. He said, well, how often do you do it? He said, we do it every year. He said, well, sir, can you tell me how many times people go out to check? And the man said to him, he said, well, Your Honor, we don't get a chance to go out and check everybody because there's so many projects and we have so little manpower, so we can't do everything. It's almost like the honor system. You take the money, you did the job, you sign off that you did the job. He said, do you have your records? He said, look in your records and see how often they signed off in Harlem River houses. They signed off in every year. And I told the judge, Your Honor, they ain't sprayed the trees since I was a little boy in that pool. My father looked at the judge looked at my father, he said, well, Mr. Carlson, had you seen any caterpillars, dead caterpillars? My father said, well, sir, I start my business at 7 in the morning and I leave my business at 8 at night. He said, now, when I come home at night, I'm not looking for caterpillars. He said, but I don't recall stepping on any caterpillars coming in. And I'm telling him, no, he ain't sprayed no more. But come to find out, people that was in the project, that was in the audience like you are, and they stepped up to the plate. And they said to him, he said, Mr. Carlos, your son is remarkable. Because we all talked about the caterpillars, but nobody had the initiative to do anything. Now, the judge told my father, say, Mr. Carlos, you need to send this kid to law school because he'd be a great lawyer. Because I represented myself well. And when, as a young kid, this is the thing that kind of tipped me into having no fear in life. Because we were walking out the courthouse, we got about midway walking out, and my father stopped and he said to me, he said, Johnny, he said, you've done many things that I didn't particularly understand, and I whipped your butt many times. He said, but I've never seen you cry, and I've never seen you apologize for what you thought you was doing right. He said, I can't express to you how proud I am of you today. Your little kid here, his daddy talking about he's proud of him. That's phenomenal. But then we walk a little farther, we get ready to go out the courthouse, push the door, and he stops me in the doorway, and he said, Johnny, I'll tell you I was proud of you. He said, but I'm going to have to tell you something else. And I said, what's that, Pop? He said, I can never tell you how much respect I have for you. Now, at 13, 14 years old, for your daddy to tell you about respecting you, that's something the child is supposed to have for the mom and the dad, not the dad for the son. So my attitude from that day forth, if my father think that I earn respect, when I do things in my life and you don't want to get the respect, you're going to give me some respect. That's the way I carried myself all through my life. I don't do things for me. I ran track. When I ran track because it was something to do. When I went around the world, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world because I got an opportunity to realize the meaning and the focus of education. Prior to me running track, I ain't no need for no education. It's about hustle. But then as I go around the world, I began to realize the value of education. And when I looked at the value of education, then I started looking at how we can solve problems. The only way we're going to solve problems is to bring attention to problems. That guy 45 in the White House right now, he's a problem. And y'all have to solve it. Okay? Yep, security, bring security in here. Don't applaud me for the truth. Okay? He's a problem. Okay? But you sit back and think about him being a problem and think about those individuals that's on the other side that's lost, like they lost their conscious mind because they letting this man sell not just the United States, but sell the world, pulling the drain to stop out the tub, and the world is getting ready to go down the drain because if America falls, everybody falls. This guy is telling me that he's Putin's buddy. and yet and still going to tell me as an athlete I'm unpatriotic. I'm more of a patriot than him. All these guys out here playing football is more patriots than him. But he want to call them sons of bees. He want to talk about I grab women by the crouch. And all the Christians that run around talking about I'm a Christian this and I'm a Christian that, but they close their eyes to reality. I could have closed my eyes in 1968 and say, well, it ain't affecting me. I ain't worried about the rest of them. But as I said, if my partners are not comfortable, how can I be comfortable? I had one thing that happened to me when I was young. My first daughter was being born. And my wife asked me to go to get some milk. And I was walking across the street. I don't know, I must have been about 20, 19. I got married my senior year in high school. And mind you, she wasn't pregnant. I married her because I loved her, okay? So I want to make sure we clear with that. Wasn't no shotgun wedding here. But as I'm walking across the street, I see 3 white kids knock a 4th white kid to the ground. And they're kicking him in the head, putting their foot up in his chest. And when I walked over there, I'm not looking at color, saying, oh, they white people, they didn't bother me. Let me mind my business and keep going. Well, I started grabbing them, pulling them off, and throwing them off. The guy, like, what are you doing? Because I didn't like bullies. I still don't like bullies. And when I went to pull them off, and I'm going to pull this guy up off the ground, and I realized how sick racism is. Because I'm defending him, and trying to help him, and he looks up at me and he says to me, nigga, why don't you mind your own business? It made me start to think. I said, wow, if this guy's getting heels in his mouth, and he'd tell me that, then I started thinking about adults. And I've seen some adults that indicate I'm a racist from head to toe. And I go up to him and I ask him, I said, man, let me ask you a question. You don't like me, you don't know me, but you make it clear to me that you don't like me. I said, but let me ask you this question. If we're walking down the street, you and your lady walking down the street, and your lady just falls on the ground and gasping for air, she can't get no oxygen. And you don't know nothing about CPR, and I just left the class from taking CPR to get my certificate. And I jumped down to support your woman. Would your racism stop me from saving her life? See, that's questions you have to ask them. Now, we can't come together because God said, well, let me create this earthquake. Now the earthquake is here, so now I can get along with Hispanics, now I can get along with whites, now I can get along with blacks, now I can get along with Asians, because we have a major quake. And we have to come together to survive. But once we get everything in order, then we go back to our sacred bias and prejudiced ways. We have to stop that. Why do we have to stop it? We have to stop it because when we do it, your kids is watching you do it and they want to emulate you. You remember that commercial? So that guy sit down with his kid in the park and they're under the tree, and the guy takes his cigarette and he lights his cigarette up and he sits the pack on the ground. First thing the kid do, let me do like daddy. Let me get the cigarette and put it in my mouth. Well, that's what happens in society. You know, the president say, I have courage. I don't have any more courage than anyone in this audience or anyone outside those doors. The only difference is I know who I am. Once you realize who you are, can't nobody stop you from doing right. 51 years I've been trying to make people wake up. They talk about black power. You know what the black power was in Mexico City? Open down that track. This butt was the black power. Okay? Well, they tried to make it, anti-America, anti-white. No, it wasn't nothing like that. And because we put a glove on, let me explain to you about the symbols that we had. First of all, the glove. We wore the glove because it was the first time they ever had the games in a third world country. That's the first time they ever had the games televised worldwide. It's the first time in the world that the games were ever televised in Technicolor. So therefore, we had to have some black gloves. Okay? Now, the essence of the gloves, people put it up and they say that was black power. But it's not black power as much as it is black unity. Because if you look at a fist, any fist, and you open it up, you got 5 different ethnic people here. And if they come together and say, man, you know, if we can move this pebble from this side of the road to that side of the road, we can make a significant difference for society to make everyone more pleasant. One guy jumps down, he said, man, I got it. And he gets down and he's pushing and he's shoving. But after a while, he realized he ain't moved nothing. And he get up and the guy tells him, man, you know what you didn't do? You didn't put your hips into it, man. You got to put your hips in it. And he jumped down and he can't do it. But at the end of the day, all of them realize that we can't do anything individually. But when we come together, unification, we become a very powerful force. That's what we are, human beings. We ain't separate. When you die, you're going to go see the same God I'm going to see, or you're going to see the same devil that I might see. You know, I'm not saying the same God that you're going to see and the same devil that I might see. Because I did some things in my life, might be borderline. But like they talking about, what have you done in your life? For 51 years, the other day, the Olympic Committee called me and told me, say, Dr. Carlos, this is the CEO of the United States Olympic Committee. I said, yeah, well, you know, I don't normally answer the calls on Sunday. I said, Sunday is my day and God's day. I said, but when I saw it said the United States Olympic Committee, I said, this must be serious. I said, what can I do for you? She said, well, I'm calling you to let you know that we have voted to induct you and Dr. Smith into the Hall of Fame if you would accept. And I said to her, most definitely I will accept. But you know what's in my head and in my heart? I'm accepting this award not for me, but I'm accepting it for my mom, my dad that's deceased. I'm accepting it for my wife that's deceased. I'm accepting it for my new wife that I have and all my kids, my brothers and sisters and their kids, to give them pride, to know that your son, your brother, your uncle, your father, your grandfather has succeeded in life, bar none, regardless of what they try and throw in front of you to tell you about who he was. But me, personally, relative to the Hall of Fame, I'm trying to get in God's Hall of Fame. That's the ultimate Hall of Fame for me. Medals, trophies, plaques, they don't mean nothing to me. Applause don't mean anything to me. What means something to me is that I can make it a better world for my kids, like you should be thinking about making it a better world for your kids and your kids' kids. You can't allow a guy to go into the White House and you know that he don't have your kids in mind to the point where he's trying to mess up ecology right now, and little girls say, I'm fighting to have pure air, I'm fighting to have clean oceans, and then he gonna sit up and call a young girl retarded, and we sit back and we be silent. Wake up. The clock is running. God said the meek shall inherit the earth. I tell a lot of people, he said, the meek shall inherit the earth. And I have to tell him, I say, well, man, just about think about this. He did say the meek shall inherit the earth. Who's more meek than me? I say, but the question is, how long will it be once I inherit this earth? Because the way I see it right now, we're self-destructing. I don't have no more in me than you have in you. Only difference is I got in a situation where I could expose what I had in me to the world. I'm not in this thing for the moment. I'm in it for the movement. I'm in it from 1968, October 1968, to the day I die. You know, I remember the police had chokeholds on me in L.A. Because after Mexico, police saw my name, oh, they're going to come, they'll put the chokehold on me and do everything. And I remember I had to tell a cop I lost my voice for a couple of weeks after because I was straining while he was choking me. And I told him, I said, man, you made a big mistake. He looks at me, he said, what do you mean he made a big mistake? The sergeant, what do you mean he made a mistake? I said, you made a mistake too. What are you talking about? I said, man, the way you acting right now, the biggest mistake that you made is you don't have that hood on your head. And I see your face. I don't have no fear for dying because I was born dead. I said, but I want you to know wherever I go, I don't want you to think that it ceased right here, because I'm going to stand on the side, wait for you to come, because we're going to carry it on. God bless you, and thank you for having me. And listen, I understand we're supposed to have some Q&A. I hope y'all some good questions.
Okay, we have 20 minutes for Q&A. If you want to line up at the two microphones, and we're just going to go one. Sir?
I must tell you, John, you inspired me before I heard you tonight. 2 days ago, I got an upgrade, and I sat next to the man when he flew out on Thursday morning from Atlanta. And I spent 4.5 hours sitting next to him.
I tried and go to sleep, he wouldn't let me.
Well, it's true. So, when I got on the plane, I just gotten an email from the New York Times telling me that Elijah Cummings had passed. And I was blessed because I got to sit down next to John here. He checked his own email. He wasn't sure what was going on. And then we watched CNN, and there were some other things going on that morning on CNN. It was just an absolute mess. And John, I told you then, and I tell you now, I have been blessed. I have been blessed by the fact that I've been part of the Boys Club movement, Boys and Girls Club now. John has done some things with
Thanks, Joe.
Boys Club.
Well, listen, man, in the interest of time, let some of these people get some of these questions. You, my man, we can talk on the phone anytime. Are we done? Okay, guys, have a good night.
Good evening, sir. It's a pleasure. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay. Question I have for you is one I've kind of been struggling with a little bit from some recent news. Has to do with our brother LeBron James and the China situation. The same young man who they told not that long ago to shut up and dribble, and now they're saying, why is it that you're not fighting and talking for someone who's dealing with injustice? I'm just wondering what your thoughts are in terms of A, is that fair to put on him, and B, is it fair to criticize because he didn't stand up?
First of all, I made a statement at the closing of this little seance we have in here. And the statement was, I'm not in the moment, I'm in the movement. You can't make a statement for today and then tomorrow change the statement. Say, I'm going for the dollar, opposed to me going for people that's less fortunate. Those people over there are fighting right now for their life like we fought for our lives back in the early 1800s, 1900s. You can't change up because of the dollar. You understand? So, on the First Amendment rights, people say the right to speak. But that First Amendment right goes both ways. You have a right not to speak too. Now, my attitude towards LeBron's, and I love LeBron's, I love Kaepernick, but my thing to them is, man, you got to go and research before you get to running your mouth. That's the greatest thing about what we did in 1968 coming out of San Jose State. We wasn't a fly-by-night, man. We was in the library every day studying to make sure when they came to us and put a question to us, we could elaborate on that question and had a full understanding as to what they were saying to us. So if LeBron's make a statement and say, man, I'm for the voiceless, you can't say it today and not be it for tomorrow. If he changes up, the end result is there. If the shoe fits, you have to wear it. But at the same time, I always look at it and say he's young enough that he can grow, and he will get stronger and wiser. He'll survive. So think about this. Imagine if that was me 51 years ago. I didn't have nothing in my pocket then but holes. He made a mistake, but I'm sure he got about $40, $50 million that he can survive on, where he can get himself together to say, hey man, I made a tragic mistake in my life, and I realized the mistake, and I corrected it and move on. And I say corrected because I'm going to tell you this. The greatest invention of all time was not the airplane, wasn't the kite, wasn't the TV or the submarine. It was something that every one of us used in here, and that's the eraser on the pencil. That's the greatest invention of all time because every one of us, with the exception of maybe Jesus, has made a mistake in life. What the ideal is to correct it and move on.
Hi, thank you for speaking. I really enjoyed your talk, and I just have
Oh, hold before you go. Is your mom's birthday today?
tomorrow.
Could I sing happy birthday to her today? Happy birthday
please.
to you.
Hey.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear mommy. Happy birthday to you.
Hey. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Yes, happy birthday, Mom. But my question is, I know that most times, and especially we just spoke about LeBron and you spoke about the movement versus the moment. Some athletes are very vocal and feel like they have a responsibility to speak out, and there's others that are passive. In this current state, especially in the wake of Colin Kaepernick and the NFL specifically, what do you think, if anything, is the responsibility of athletes to kind of, use their voice and platform for social activism?
The ultimate responsibility of any worldly figure is to let them know that I might be this superstar, but I wasn't a superstar when I was born. I built myself into this superstardom, but I cannot forget where I came from. I can't forget the struggle that I had to get where I am, and I can't forget those individuals that never made it out, that had far more talent than me. So I tell anybody that's a public figure, whether he be an athlete, whether he be a writer, or whether he be an artist, or whatever the case may be, that you are a role model and you should be a role model for society to step up and speak for those that cannot speak for themselves. Because each and every one of these athletes have gone through their communities and they've seen people that was downtrodden. How you gonna forget them? How you gonna forget them? You wasn't expected to make $10 in your life. You got $10 million, now you're scared to speak for those that don't have the $10 that you had when you started. Now, every individual should step up to the plate and have the conviction and the courage. Most of all, what I have passion for what I do. I have passion for my people, for all people. You understand? People think about the race. Man, they talking about track and field. I'm talking about the human race. That's the game that I'm trying to win. Okay, Sugar?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a great birthday, Mama.
Dr. Carlos, it's an honor.
Mom.
I'm a youth pastor for a church in Riverside, and I get to pastor our students in a community that is multicultural, racial, and and something I've learned in youth is that these students nowadays have a platform at the reach of their fingertips. That these students have the power of making just a movement with their their text messages. But what I see in the youth that I constantly connect is they constantly want to speak out in the voice they have, but they're told a lie that the world tells them that they're not good enough or their words are not valuable enough. And you said something really powerful that I was just like, man, this is awesome. You said, I'm not here for the moment, I'm here for the movement. And I feel like our youth are being told, you only got a moment, when actually they are the movement. What would you say to, a teenager right now looking up to you and saying, how can I be, like in Matthew 5:14, the city on the hill, being the beacon?
Well, first of all those things that you just mentioned, that was what I was told as a kid. You're never going to be anything. I did a lot of things that people didn't understand what I was doing when I was a kid. My mother, I love my mother, beyond earth. But my mother used to tell me, say, Johnny, you're going to spend half of your life in jail. And I remember telling my mother, I said, Mom, I don't know what script you're reading, but that's not the script I'm reading. Understand? There's a lot of individuals that's out there to put you down in a subtle sort of way. College is not for you. You need to go to a trade school. And I remember when I was going to this trade school, and I took up the cabin making and auto mechanics and all that. And I said, man, that ain't me. I'm going to get something that's going to work my mind. They always tell you that you're not going to make it. But when you get in touch with that man in the mirror, and you know who you are, it's between you and whoever that spirit is. Can no man on earth step in your way and tell you that you cannot have anything if you want it? Understand? Parents have the responsibility to build that factor in their kids from day one. We lost that somewhere. Our kids don't know about respect. They don't know about responsibility. They don't know nothing about pulling their pants up and show that you got some hygiene. Understand? And we can't put all the blame on them because a lot of times the parents was missing in action. Y'all remember when they had the disco going, mom and daddy was out there discoing. While they was discoing, they didn't check to see whether Johnny did his homework. A lot of parents was out there back in the day when I was coming through. They didn't have McDonald's and Carl's Jr. and all that. Right now, kids don't even get a wholesome meal no more because they give them a coupon and tell them go to McDonald's and get dinner. So while we have these things going on, and that's the thing, when you in your church and you start preaching a sermon, make them get in touch with themselves. Make them come back to the responsibility that they have to lead their kids until their kids can lead themselves. That's vital. Now, all my trials and tribulations from Mexico to today, you know what my biggest thing was? When I went to Mexico City at 23 years old, I was more concerned about my kids than anything on planet Earth. And most of them wasn't even born then. I had my first daughter in 65. My son didn't come until 2 years after Mexico. But when you sit back and you think, say, well, how can I be in a position in life where everybody chant my name and know my name, and I'm going to be so selfish to think it's all about me? No, it's about my kids. Why is it about my kids? Because my daddy was in the First World War, and he told me how it was for him in the First World War as a young black man fighting for a country that when he came home, he found that his country didn't have no love for him. I can't have my kids and my kids' kids come up and go through the same ordeal. So it's about trying to plant wisdom. That's why I started when I said, I am not here for applause, but I am here to reach that guy there, or reach that lady there, or reach this young fella that was sitting in the front. I'm out here trying to make that connection. Because if I make the connection, you're the light in my brother. You're going to make the connection to the rest. God bless you, my man.
Thank you, sir.
You done?
Hi. Thank you for your inspirational speech. It really touched me.
All right, buddy.
Yeah. So the fight against racism has changed the fight against racism has changed over the decades with new ideas and new values and new government coming to the U.S. How do we fight against racism now in the modern age?
Well, you know, the fight against racism hasn't changed. It really hasn't. It's just more prominent now. There's more people becoming involved in terms of saying, man, I'm waking up to this. More people shedding that fear factor that they had. You know, a lot of people in Mexico City during that time, they wanted to put their fist to the sky. They wanted to make a statement. They wanted to do a collective step back from the games called a boycott. They wanted to do it. But the fear factor was there. I'm afraid if they see me step back from the games, I might have my job tomorrow. I might get kicked out of my university tomorrow. My wife and kids might not understand what I did. A lot of them had the fear factor. Even when we was on Wall Street, and all the people that were working in Wall Street, they was walking by every day, and I could see in their eyes, man, I would give my arm to be with you, but I'm scared. I saw it before it was all said and done. A few of them broke through and came through. But the bottom line is, it hasn't changed, man. The opposers, they still got the same game that they've been running, trying to stop you and hold you back. Only difference is now you got numbers standing with you. Say, hey, man, we can change society. If I do my share today and you do your share tomorrow, Think about this. If we're going to do something, let's say we got 10 guys, and I tell them, I say, hey, man, here we got to move this mountain here, all right? But in order for it to get there, we got to get this tank to go up there. So we in the tank, and one of the 10 guys say, man, you know, I'm the most important part of the tank because I'm the spyglass. The other guy said, nah, man, I'm the most important part of the tank because I'm the cannon in case we got to blow some of that mountain away. And the guy said, well, I think I'm the most important. And they look at him and say, man, you ain't nobody, you just a little spring. But think about this. That spring might be the spring to raise up the cannon. That spring might be the spring to put the binocular up. So without that little spring, it might be the spring that turns the wheel. The cannon can't function to do the job if everybody's not working together, right? So when we get in sync and realize this is the enemy, racism, and we say everybody do their job, we can erase a lot of the problems we have in society. You just stay on point, man, and get your buddies to wake up with you.
Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you for not applauding. Come on, baby.
Woo.
Speak up.
Okay. Hi.
Speak up.
Like this?
There you go.
There we go. Okay.
I mean, I want the audience to hear you.
Oh, all right. Okay. Hopefully this is loud enough. Hi. So I was figuring I'm gonna try and ask you a question that maybe relates to people of my generation.
All right.
Like, what is your thoughts about like disabilities as well as like the LGBT community? Just because I know for me, I have a disability, and because of the way my disability works, I can be able to speak out about it, whereas I know a lot of people with mine can't. And sometimes, you know, you feel like you kind of have a sense of pressure to be able to speak out because you know you can do it because a lot of people can't.
Well, that's what we're talking about. You being a voice for those that have the same situations, don't have the courage to speak out like you. Okay? You know, there's a guy, singer, okay? Very famous guy, very famous singer. This guy was the same as you. He said, man, you know, I don't sing in the public for fear. And the way they discovered this guy is a guy that lived in the building where he lived, and every day he would walk by and he would hear this voice sound like an angel's voice. So one day he went there and he knocks on the door, and he says, the guy says, excuse me, and the guy comes to the door and he's got a towel wrapped around him. And he said, man, listen, I live here and I'm walking by every morning. I hear you singing this song, hear the radio. What station is that on the radio where that music is coming from? And he said to him, he said, man, that's the shower water and that's me singing. The guy said, no, that's not you. He said, yeah. He said, well, man, if that's you singing, you have such a great voice. Why wouldn't you sing? And he said, well, man, I'm scared. I have a fear for getting in front of people. And the guy told him, say, here's my card and come down. You in California here. You ever North Hollywood? You heard of North Hollywood, right?
Me?
You.
What about me?
Have you ever heard of North Hollywood?
Something Hollywood?
The north side of Hollywood.
North side of Hollywood.
Right. Well, they got a building up there. It's a funny looking building, almost look like the Tower of Pisa. They got these funny ornaments hanging off of it. Well, this singer built that building. For fear, he said, man, I can't go in front of an audience. The guy told him, said, take my card, man. What we can do, we put you on the record. You don't have to sing in front of an audience. But he was so overwhelmed once he got on the record, till he said, man, I got to step up and let these people see who I am. He was the first black individual to have a variety show on TV. You ever heard of Capitol Records? You ever heard of a guy named Nat King Cole? Well, look here, what you do, see, because you just missed that generation. So what you do some research, find out who he is. If he took the initiative to say, man, I have fear to the point where I have fear to sing in front of people, we'd have never heard who he was. We'd have never had Capitol Records. We'd have never had a lot of things for fear. You're strong enough to realize that you might have a disability, and what you have to do is speak for those that have the same disability, that have fear for speaking on their disability. Just the same as that young girl that I said that got up and she started speaking about ecology, speak about smog, purity of the ocean. Understand? She had disabilities too, but she never let her disabilities stop her one iota from doing what she felt was right. And that's what you're doing, what's right. Encourage your partner, step up and say, you know, I ain't nobody special, I ain't no different than you. What I'm doing, you could do. All right? All right.
Thanks.
We're gonna be here, Doc.
Hi, my name is Gabe Estrada. I go to Valencia High School, and I was wondering, like, even when nobody else was doing what's right, what gave you the bravery to do what was right?
Man, I think that's just a built-in mechanism that God gave. You know, have no fear. You know, I mean, people have fears because they have fear for dying and so forth like that. And I think early in my life it came to me that no matter what I do, I'm going to die at the end anyway. You understand? But the problem that I have right now is not about dying. It's about how we can make things better while I'm alive, how we can do things better for people in life. I can't wait for those that I thought the politicians or the clergy or the business people would step up to the podium and do certain things. You feel me? I had to do it. And when I did it, when everybody else started raising Cain about what I did, you know what came to my brain? I must have did something right. Because I ain't never heard them say nothing before. All right?
Oh, also, one more question. This is a bit less serious, but you actually burned down a couple of trees over caterpillars?
I burned down them trees, man, not because of the couple of caterpillars, but because them caterpillars infringed upon my mother's free will. Okay? And caterpillars was a pest, and they had pesticide for pests. Now this man was getting paid to spray those trees, and they was giving him money. He was pocketing the money, and the people were suffering based on the caterpillars. So the trees, like I stated, the trees are doing fine. But you know, certain times in life, you have to set a precedent. You have to set a new paradigm to make people realize that somebody did something. I never saw it before, but somebody did it, and I know it can be done. You go to law school, the first thing they're going to do is say, well, let's check the book and see if they ever had this case before. Same thing applies in your question. Everybody's got courage. They just have to find it. All right. Yes, sir.
Mr. Carlos.
Be careful.
Mr. Carlos, there's 1 year between us.
All right.
1 year. I've come from the same place that you've come from. I'm a product of the 60s.
All right.
I'm a product of the 50s. I'm an after effect of the 40s. And I wanted to say, I came here tonight especially to see you. I've worshiped you, Tommy Smith, Henry Carr,
my brother,
Mel Pender, Hayes Jones all my life. I used to be a high hurdler back in the 60s, 120s and 180s.
Is that right? You was running against Leon Coleman, Earl McCullough?
I ran against McCullough up at Quantico, at the Quantico Relays.
Quantico.
Did
Earl go to Quantico?
No, Earl went to Villanova.
Irv Hall went to Quantico.
But he ran in the Quantico Relays up in the Marine Corps base near D.C.
Not Earl. You think about Earl McCullough, but he went to USC.
I'm thinking of.
Willie Davenport.
No, not Davenport. No.
You think about Irv Hall.
Irv Hall.
Yeah.
I told you we're the same age.
Yeah, right. I'm just trying to help you out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Some names, you know.
But I just wanted to say that the journey that you've traveled, you know, every time I see or saw something that was about you, and I remember in '68 when I was 22, and you took that stand during that time. That impressed me, and that stayed with me all my life. And I asked this question of you: Do you think that where we are now? I mean, I know where we are now. You know where we are now because we've come from that.
Right.
And here, both you and I now having this conversation, 50 years later. Do you think, in your heart of hearts, there'll ever be, not necessarily the athlete, but the people, a person, as an Ali, as yourself, anyone, Malcolm, anyone from that area. Do you see anybody now?
That's the problem. That's the problem.
Yeah.
They haven't come out yet. You know, I had a meeting with Mr. Kaepernick, and I told him that I admired him, I respect him for his vision, his courage. But I said to him, I said, Mr. Kaepernick, let me just make it clear to you that, hey, man, you cannot jump into the pool of humanitarianism and think that it's in the moment. I said, man, you in this pool for the rest of your life. And the most important thing is that you cannot jump out there and then go dormant. I said, because if you go dormant, somebody's going to jump in your spot and they might not lead it where you think it needs to be led. Okay? So, as I stated earlier to the young lady here, individuals, man, have to find out who they are within themselves, find out what passions they have, and start to move on it. Understand? We have so much going for young kids today, man. I remember when I had a little 6 transistor radio, I stood in my shirt pocket, right? And they said, that's too small, let's get them a boom box. Well, kids today, you know, we was on local trains when we came through. These kids today is on the bullet train. Everything shooting by them so fast, man, they can't digest who they are, where they are, or where they're going. See, so the more we come out and they expose who we were in the life that we had, the individuals will get a chance to see that blueprint. They get a chance to say, hey, man, I want to be like that guy. I want to be like that woman over there. You understand? When I was a kid, they used to tell me about a woman named Joan of Arc, how they burned her to the stake. I said, she must have been a bad babe, boy. They burned her to the stake. You understand? But when you sit back and you realize Joan of Arc was like us, she was a forerunner too. And they're going to try and stop every forerunner. But I see so much progress and young individuals in terms of formalizing who they are themselves now. Not just the athletes. We've got people that, and they're writing the literature. When they put in the music industry, they starting to come out and they starting to say, I feel good about who I am. And I remember where I came from. I remember those individuals that had far more talents than me that we lost. Okay? We're going to have to wrap this up.
Do you mind 2 more questions, one and one?
Oh, no, whatever, you know.
No, because we have to wrap up.
Yeah.
So we're going to have one question to this gentleman and one question
Okay.
to the gentleman there. And then
All right, baby. We get a picture together, man. All right, bro. Sure.
Good evening, Dr. Carlos. My name is Mike Rodriguez. I'm a teacher in Santa Ana. Okay. And first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for your lifetime of service, for the people. We met about 15 years ago. I came to see you speak in downtown LA at La Plaza when your book first came out. And there was a few less people than there are today. but I'm very happy to be here. And basically, there's some students here as well. One of the students, Marla, I'm calling her out now, but she was she organized the first youth climate strike in Anaheim last month, and I don't know. You want to raise your hand, Marla? Where you at?
Where is she? Let us stand up. Where's she at?
Where's she at?
Where you at, Marla?
There she is, right there.
Where you at, baby girl?
She's right there. Yeah.
Stand up. Let me see you. Let me see you. Hey, there you go. Right on, baby girl. Like they say, power to the people.
Power of the people, right? And actually, my students are here too. A couple of them from Saddleback as well, from a club called Nuestra Gente. And some other students as well are here with Ms. Gracian. Her dad was supposed to go to Mexico City in 1968 to protest at Tlatelolco. But I think he got grounded and he couldn't make it.
Well, I'm going to tell you something, man. It says it might be said, it might have saved his life. Yeah, it might have saved his life because, they took so many of them young students out. It's a shame because, we think about history, think about what took place in Victory Stand and so forth. But Americans actually whitewashed the truth about what happened in Mexico City. They made my story the biggest story, but my story should have been minute to the story of those young students losing their lives. They gunned down. They tell general public. First they said it was 50 people died. Then they said it was 150 people died. Then they got up to 300 people died. But in reality, 2,200 people lost their lives. But it just gunned them down in the sake of saying the games must go on. If you ever look at the documentary, they did a documentary called Fist of Freedom. And you see in the documentary, you see this guy, and he's on the phone, and he's talking to one of the Olympic officials. And he says, the United States team coming to Mexico. And the guy says to him, clean up your business, handle your business. And the next thing, they turned the guns loose on all those students and the student followers. They killed 2,200 of them. And when they killed so many of them, they took them and they threw their bodies in the furnace. When they couldn't burn no more, they took the rest of them on the Coast Guard cutters and took them out to the ocean and dumped them. Turned the guns back on the other people and told them, say, if you don't want to follow suit like those that's gone, go up to the mountains and don't come down and tell Mexico their games are over. So when you sit back and think, question yourself and say, why haven't you learned that history? 51 years later, half of America don't even know that took place. That's a travesty. Somebody is supposed to stand accountable for that. I'm glad you mentioned that, brother.
I just want to say thank you very much. If we could talk afterwards, that'd be great.
Hey, matter of fact, we can go home. We don't want this guy to get on the mic, please. And look here, let me just say this with this guy on the mic right now. This guy here was such an inspiration to me as a sprinter. I mean, look at him. He's so little he couldn't fill that jacket out. But pound for pound, he was one of the baddest runners, sprinters that I ever did see. And when I really got a first chance to roll up on him and meet him, I found out that he was a likable guy too. I thought all quarter mile something was wrong with him, but this guy's all right. I love you, Ronnie.
Man, I just wanted to tell you that I said to you, this day was coming, and you have been able to give a testimony.
Ooh.
A testimony.
Oh yeah.
And you cannot give a testimony unless you've been tested.
Unless I've been what?
Unless you've been tested. Tested.
I'm still being tested.
Yeah, you see.
I run with Ed Crummers every day. I'm still being tested.
Yeah, but it's your turn now. And I told you this day was gonna come.
I love you, Ronnie. Just make sure you be out there for Thanksgiving.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Giancarlo.
Thank you so much for coming out.